This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, for our week 6, chapter 9 tax return overview, there are a few things that I wanted to touch on to make sure you know how to enter into the tax software. The couple main things are how to enter in education expenses, and then how to enter in childcare expenses, as well as remembering that childcare expenses are the lesser of the lower spouse's income or with their deemed schooling. We're going to have that because, as you'll see in our tax documents, Martha does not have a W-2. She doesn't work, but she is deemed to have gone to school for 5 months. So if you go back to our lesson for this week, that will come into play as they will be allowed some of the credit, but some of it will actually be added back. We'll explain it all as we go through here. So if you haven't already, what I would do is pause this video and enter in the basic information along with the W-2 for Larry, and then we can really get started on entering in some of the more detailed information. Okay, as we look at the documents, make sure as you were entering in, this box 12 is going to become very important. This is our dependent daycare FSA, where money was put into our FSA account, our flexible spending account, and we can use that money then tax-free to pay for childcare. That money is not included in any one of these numbers in boxes 1, 3, or 5. However, you do see the difference between boxes 1 and 3, and that's because of the retirement money that was put aside. It is taxable for Social Security and Medicare, but not for federal withholdings. And then we've got our healthcare item here, how much the employer has put in. Now don't get confused. Dorothy is the daughter. This is not the spouse. So for the tax return being, we're not going to put this information in for Larry's return. We do not need it. This will go on Dorothy's individual own return. Martha has a 1098-T, but if you remember back to our notes for this lesson, we do not use these 1098-Ts. I do not like them. The only thing we're going to use from it is this federal ID number. And that's also the case for the daughter. We're going to use that for her as well. And then the last thing we have here, we're going to need to enter in the student loan interest that was paid for Larry's previous education debt. So with that, let's get started. You should have the return open. We're going to have both kids enter it in, nothing weird with them for this return. The first thing we come up to is Martha. Let's go ahead and enter in Martha's education. So I'm going to pull up, oops, I'm going to have to pause it real quick, and I'll come back and I'll have the return pulled up.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we're back here with I've got the tax return pulled up. Let's go ahead and pull into the 1040. So we got Larry and Martha. We got the 2 kids listed here, Dorothy being part of the credit for other dependents. Because remember, she does not count for the child tax credit. She is too old. However, the small son is eligible. Okay, the first thing, let's go into for the education credits. So the best way to do that is to go into the tax return where education credits are, which an easy place to find them is in Schedule 3 in the education credit. You won't have anything here yet. So I'm going to go into Martha. First thing we want to do is pick the correct Social Security number out of the drop down. And we answer these questions. These are going to help the program know if we can take the American Opportunity Credit or the Lifetime Learning Credit or neither. This is one of her first few years in school, so we pick the 0 through 3. That's going to specify that if eligible, we can take the American Opportunity Credit. We do need to enter in the EIN number for the school. That is going to be important, otherwise it won't calculate properly. And then what I do, instead of actually putting items on the 1098-T because it's incorrect, I go ahead and put them off to the side. I put them here as not reported. So the first thing is, how did I get 2,400? we need to go back to the sheet and we need to add up how much money, remember going back to my lecture notes, how much money did I put in or was paid to Ivy Tech through loans, out of pocket, and free money, and then subtracting out the total refund. That's how much Ivy Tech kept, so therefore that's what our tuition would have been and or books added in. So we had $7,000 paid in, subtracting out the refund of $4,600. That's how I get the $2,400 of tuition and books. Then down here, I need to enter in how much free money did I get? And it told us that we had $3,500 in free money. Well, if my tuition was only $2,400 and I got $3,500 in free money, that means I got back $1,100 of a refund of free money that wasn't mine. I don't have to pay it back, unlike the loan. So even though I got back quite a bit of money as a refund, I got back $4,600, most of that was my loan money. But $1,100 of it was free money, and that I have to pay tax on. So this $1,100 is going to get added to line 1 of the 1040 as taxable income. And then you can see as we get down here to line 10, none of my expenses qualify for any credits because I don't have any. I didn't pay anything out of pocket. Let's transition now to the daughter. The daughter will have items that are eligible for the credit. So we got to pick the appropriate daughter here. Make sure you click on that little white box and then click on the social security number for the daughter. And then she has the same answers as the mother. It's her first couple years. She is taking a degree program at least half time. The employer ID number. Now, I tell us right in the problem how much her tuition and books are. We didn't even have to figure it up. It says normal tuition and books is $17,000, room and board $7,000. That's just extra information. We don't need to know that for tax purposes. And then here's how much free money she got to help pay that $17,000. She got $8,000 to pay off on her total bill. So we put in the $17,000 as her billed amount. And then the $8,000 of it was free money. What that leaves us in is everything we have is fine. It's all fine as tax-free scholarships. And then that extra $9,000, when you take the 17 minus the 8,000, the extra 9 is actual qualified expenses for the American Opportunity Credit. And at that point, we can then go to Form 8863, and we can look to see how this is actually playing out for tax purposes. So we go to Form 8863, and you can see the full $2,500 here. That's the amount we're allowed. We can't take any more than that. We could go down to line 30 and see how that was calculated if you would like. You could go to page 2. Not Martha, we want to go to Dorothy. And it says, okay, enter in for your expenses not more than $4,000, and we did that. And then remember, dollar for dollar for the first 2, a quarter of every dollar for the next 2,000. So that's where they get the $2,500 from. You can see nothing showing up for the mother because she's actually getting free money. So the $2,500 at 40%, this is the amount that's refundable, $1,000. So the amount that's left then that we can still potentially take is $1,500. But when we go all the way through the tax return, we're going to find that we only owe $1,100 in tax. So we can't quite take the full $1,500. We're going to lose $400, but still that did take us down to $0 taxable liability. All right, so that takes care of Martha and Dorothy. Now let's look at John, and we got to fill in this daycare information. So the best way to do that is to, again, go to the 1040 and the child independent care, which is Schedule 3. The child independent care is here. Yours will have a blank or maybe just a question mark, perhaps. We need to fill in this information. If we don't, it won't calculate. So you need to fill in the the daycare and their address. You have to have all of this information. And then how much was paid. And then as we go down through, the one thing that's going to be that we have to be careful of is line 5 here, and then further down, I believe it's line 19. The only income we have, earned income, is from one person. So it's going to look like that the lower of either spouse is 0. That's not the case. Our spouse did have deemed income, remember, from being in school for 5 months, $250 a month. So when you just do the math, 250 times 5, I got $1,250. This is the amount that then going to allow us to be able to take some credit. And this is also going to come into play because this $1,250, this is all the more we are allowed to use as a tax benefit. Whereas on my W-2, I use $2,400. I use too much. I could have only used $1,250 because of the lower of either spouse's income. So I'm going to have to add back the difference between these two dollar amounts and also include that in my line 1. And that's what's happening down here in the lower part of this form. You need to enter in line 19 the $1,250 that the spouse was deemed to have made. And then that brings us to the tax program doing the calculation and saying, you took off too much. We need to add back $1,150 into your taxes. So let's go back to now the 1040. The 1040, as you can see, isn't just the $37,000 that we put in as box 1. It's the 37 plus the 1,100 of education refunds that were free money, plus the 1,150 that I took out too much for my FSA, and it's going to add that back in. So that's where this 3,950 ultimately comes from. Now we can begin to answer the rest of the questions that I have for us. So I just now have answered number 1 and 2. Where did they get the 39,250 from? Because it wasn't all box 1 of the W-2. How much is line 1? Schedule 1, line 33. Well, that's our student interest. And if we go down and look at it, it will show 1362 as long as you had put that in. The standard deduction for married filing joint, we should have that pretty well memorized by now. It's $24,000. After we do the $24,000, how much in taxes do I owe before any credits? So we take away the $24,000. This is our tax income. How much tax do I owe is right here. We owe $1,388. However, we're going to be able to take all of that away as refundable credits, and we're going to do that next. So this is looking at form 2441. I went through this kind of fast a little bit ago, but these are the same numbers. Remember that 1150 that's now taxable? And we actually get a little bit of a credit now because of some of the money being taxed, the 288. So this amount will show up as on our Schedule 3. And if we wanted to see it, we could go down to Schedule 3. There's that 288 amount. It was calculated on form 2441. So go through 2441 and see if you get the same numbers as I did. I'm going to skip down now to line 50. Line 50 is our education credits, and then going into more detail, if you go into line 50 and then in particular you go into this form for Martha or Dorothy, you can look through and see where these information come from. For Martha, you want to make sure your lines equal mine. So part 3, line 1 or 2, it doesn't matter which one you put it in. Part 3 here, you have 2,400. And then line 4 or 6, 3,500. And then it's telling me here that $1,100 is going to be added into our income. And then why isn't she going to be on form 8863 to show she gets any credits? Well, if she didn't get any credits because she didn't pay anything out of pocket. The Form 8863 will come into play for the daughter. She does get a credit on the parent's tax return, $1,000, 40% of the total amount. And then of the 1,000, so we get 2,500 plus 1,000. That means there's 1,500 left, but we can only take 1,100, and that's simply because our tax liability has run out. We don't have any more tax to pay. We can only take as much as we have to pay. Okay, line 8, the 2,000, that's part of our retirement. And I asked, why isn't that showing up on line 51? And the reason is we don't have any tax liability left to take any more away. We already had to stop up here 400 short. We definitely don't have anything left here. But if I wanted to see how much I could have taken, I can go into the 1040 line 51 and link to it. And that's going to take me to Form 8880. And if you go down to line 10, it's going to tell you how much eligible you could have taken if you didn't have if you still had some tax liability to cover. We didn't, so therefore we don't have anything left to take, but we could have taken up to $1,000. The child tax credit, notice I have 0. If we look at the 1040, because of the other credits we were able to take, there's nothing left for us to take for the child tax credit. All of it gets shifted down here to Form 8812, the additional child tax credit. Remember, we could have taken up to 2,000, but 70% of that we're allowed to take as an additional child tax credit potentially. And if you go through it, it does work out to be 70%. We didn't have any other stumbling blocks that prevent us to taking the full 70. Final question I ask here is, how much is the earned income credit? That's the last refundable credit, and that's showing up right here as 2884, 2804, I should say. Your total refund should have been 8413. Hopefully that'll give you a little bit of guidance as you go through and prepare this practice return, which is very similar to the one I made for the homework.